Why, hello, whoever it is that's here. We'll be starting at 7 as usual. I'm just going to be puttering around on the under the water quilt while we're waiting. a couple minutes to go. Ouch. Hi, and welcome to StashBlaster Quilts. I'm Maria, and I am here to help you make more quilts in less time with a lot less stress. So, I know, I forgot my lights again. Sorry, I was sewing, as those of you who were listening probably heard my machine. So I turned my lights off because it gets really hot. So I apologize about that. Anyway, so for those of you, if this is your first time, I'm a professional organizer by trade, and so we always start with a tip. And so today we're going to start by talking about expiration dates. Expiration dates, some of them are fictional, some of them are not, and some things that aren't marked should have some. So we're going to talk about those things today. So let's start with food expiration dates. Expiration dates on food are usually best by dates. That means there's somebody in a corporate office somewhere saying that when our product is about this old, it's not quite as good as it was day one. And so they decide on a date. They just pick one out of a hat, basically. Now, that doesn't mean the food has gone bad. So, on food, it's a little bit more difficult. Now, this doesn't mean that food can't be bad before its expiration date. So the thing with food is you need to smell it, you need to taste it, you need to be, does it look right? So you need to take in all those visual cues before you decide to incorporate it into your food. Because let's say you have a jarred pasta sauce or something, or ketchup or something, and it doesn't look quite right. It could be that their seal was not properly tight, and so it's gotten bacteria in there that are doing weird things. If you don't refrigerate foods that need to be refrigerated, food can go bad early. Now, some people will keep food forever. There's a problem with that because over time, the food will go bad. I opened a packet of Doritos that I didn't realize had fallen in the back of my pantry. And when I opened it up, they'd gone white. So I have no idea why they were there that long, but they were, and they're not good anymore. So I just looked at them. They didn't look right. They didn't smell right. Didn't even taste them. Didn't eat them. Canned food can last past its expiration date, but it does mean you have to pay attention when you open it because over time the metal in the cans leach into the food, and that will taint the food. What's also really weird, and I see this in a lot of houses, I'll pull like a beer can out of a pile that has not been opened, hasn't been punctured, nothing, and it'll be empty. So it can evaporate through the seals of a perfectly normal can over time. Even soup, I will grab a can of, let's say, Progresso or some other brand of soup, and I'll go to pick it up, and it'll crumble in my hands, and there won't be any liquid left. It'll just be dried vegetables. So, obviously, that's not soup anymore. It's gone bad. So food is tough. And it's particularly tough if, let's say it's a parent who grew up on a farm, especially if they're a grandparent. Because when I was growing up, for an example, if you had a block of cheese and there was some mold on it, you just cut the mold off and then you ate the cheese. That was perfectly normal, everyday activity. Of course, these days, most people go, oh my God, it's moldy, you have to throw the whole thing out. So there's some arguments there. So I just want to explain that with food, it's usually a best by date. It's not usually a true expiration date. And food can go bad early or it can last longer. You have to keep checking it. That's your best option. Now, food banks for the most part will not take expired food, but some will. So if you do have some, let's say it's not expired by more than a year for canned goods, if you want to go ahead and donate them, then you can call around and see who will take it. But it does make it more difficult. So I generally just toss food like from an estate if it's past the expiration date, so I don't have to worry about that. Okay? Then there's things like medicine. Now, I believe in the expiration dates in medicine. And the reason for that, even if they're stored properly, because each medication is actually only a tiny fraction of the pill or the liquid that you get. It gets put into a base. And some bases go bad earlier than others. Sometimes the medication itself goes bad. And a bad medication, there can be several different outcomes. It might just not work. That's probably the best outcome. The second outcome is it works, but not as much, so you're more likely to take more of it, which then starts to lead you into questions of, now are you getting into a toxic situation? Or 3, it might have just gone completely toxic. So that is a fight I will have with my clients. Food, we'll have a discussion, I'll tell them what I think, and if they don't want to go with it, it's fine. With medications, I push really hard, because I don't want something that's supposed to be life-saving to be life-taking. Okay, so medications are one of those things. Now, something that doesn't have an expiration date that needs one is makeup. I just opened this today. One of you, and I'll just say it's Margaret, sent me some new makeup because she thinks I need to go a little bit darker for doing these, particularly like in here. And so she gave me this bronzer pack. It's called Bronze Booster. And so what I did was I put a piece of masking tape, you see that there, with a date 3 months from today. Anything, whether it's, where did my lipstick go? A lipstick like this, I put a date on. Anything that I'm putting on my face, I put an expiration date on. And the reason for this is particularly around the eyes and mouth. You are transferring bacteria when you dip back into that. So let's say I was putting this on my face. I put my brush in it. I put it on my face, which now has bacteria on it because I'm a person and there's bacteria everywhere. I put it back into this to get more color and I put it back on again. But what I'm doing is transferring bacteria from my face to this material. And so there are some beauty products that are supposedly, they have antimicrobial inhibitors or something like that in it to make it so it doesn't go bad as fast. But I did have a client who wound up with an eye infection and lost her eye because of bacteria in mascara or some other makeup. They figured out it was from her makeup. So I am religious about this. I opened this today, so this is a date 3 months from today. Now, could you get along with a blusher maybe that's not, because that's not really near your mouth or your eyes? Maybe, but why really take a risk? Okay. Now, the other problem is the brush itself, right? Because again, it's on your face, it's in the makeup, it's on your face, it's in the makeup. So once a month, I clean all of my brushes so that I get the bacteria out of it. And I scrubbed these. I mean, I'm really digging in there until my soap is clean. So my bubbles stay white and it rinses clean every time. And then every once in a while, I will put it in a diluted bleach rinse. Because again, I like my eyes, want to keep them. So expiration dates mean different things depending on what the products are. There are some that are worth fighting over, some that are not. If you are talking to your mother and she has 40-year-old makeup, maybe talking about the bacteria will help. I will also suggest that, that color doesn't look good on you anymore because you're getting more sun, less sun, whatever. Why don't we go and splurge and get some new? They may keep it for 2 years, but at least there's less going on. Now, when I do open something like this, I buy another one. So that when my 3 months hits, I'm not sitting here going, oh, I don't have time to go shopping right now. I'm sure it's fine for another month, 2 months, 6 months. It's 3 years later. It's still in my drawer. Okay? So when I start one of these, I get another one to replace it. And I don't date it till the day I use it. Because if the makeup, let's say it's mascara, is sitting in my drawer for a year, it's still perfectly fine because I haven't put any bacteria into it. So the day I start it is the day I mark it. Okay? So anyway, that's the tip for today. Okay. Now for those of you who are doing the mystery quilt, I know some of you are behind on it, and that's perfectly fine. I also know that some of you are going to be watching this later because if you're part of Quilters Unlimited, there was a big meeting tonight. It starts at like 7:30. So you probably decided to watch this later. But if you are up to date, that's great. Tonight or tomorrow, we're going to go ahead and post the cut list for the interior border of the mystery quilt. Now, if this is your first time, we are done with round 6, which is where we assembled the center of our table toppers. If you go onto the website, StashBlasterQuilts.com, you will find all of the current rounds. So you can get caught up if you would like. The block itself is right here. Okay? Actually, I gotta click this because I had to move things around. The block is right here. Now, the table toppers, I have given directions for 9 blocks, which is what this is, 16 blocks, 25 blocks, and lap size. In the instructions for the interior border, I gave the count for the 9, 16, and 25. Depending on how you lay out your lap size quilt, it might be different, so I put in how you figure out how many pieces you need. It's really very simple. It depends on how many exterior edges of the blocks you have. So for example, we can't just say 9 because this one's fully encased. Okay? So we're going to get this put up, and then you'll count your outer edges, and that's how you're going to know, and you can follow the instructions. I also included the cut list sizes if you're doing the bigger blocks, because this is a 5-inch finished. I offered the measurements for 7-inch finished and a 9-inch finished. So the cut list for that is going to be up as well. So there's 14 rounds here to complete this quilt. And I know I'm saying 7 and we're already doing the interior border. That's because the rounds include things like make a label, make the quilt sandwich, do the quilting, do the binding. So the end part there, a lot of that is going to seem very simple and small. But the goal is for even those doing the lap size to be able to go ahead and complete it by the next time we meet, because we meet the first and third Wednesday of the month. So this is the smallest size. Right here, it's going to finish at about 19 inches. Oops, here we go. All right. And they get bigger. So I'm working on a 25 square and the 9 square. And so the cut lists are going to be up either tonight or tomorrow. So we're going to do the cuts this 2 weeks, and then the first Wednesday of next month, we're going to start assembling the interior border. So that's where we are with that. Okay, hold on, why is this? Okay, sorry, my screen here made it look like only part of my camera was working. So I just wanted to double check it and make sure that I hadn't, you weren't seeing just this much of me. So, sorry about that. Okay, so, last time I was on, I had just gotten my nails done. They're still here. And someone asked me why I have 2 purple fingernails, because the thumbs are the skin color as well. I started doing this probably 20 years ago. There had been a campaign through the NFL. Well, they were part of it anyway, which was called Stick a Nail in It, and it was anti-domestic violence. And the idea was that you painted your ring finger on both sides a different color, preferably purple. Well, purple is my favorite color, so that worked out well for me. But it's one of those things where I'm still doing it occasionally. I don't do it all the time. I won't be doing it when I'm doing all that speaking in August, for example, because I don't want people distracted too much by the nails. But when I'm out and around, just in general life, I do like to do that so that I can tell people what it's about. There's far too much domestic violence going on out there, and anything I can do to support reduction in that process, I want to do. I know it's a little thing. I know it's a kind of silly thing, but it is a thing. So there you go. I figure it can't be any worse than the Ice Bucket Challenge was. So I'm doing the stick a nail in it. That's why those 2 fingers are purple. I've got probably another couple of days, and then I'm going to be ripping them all off, because as soon as I start to get too much of a gap between the nail color and my cuticle, it starts to drive me crazy, and so I repaint it myself. But that's what that is. Okay, so let me move this camera down, because you don't need to see the other side of the room. You need to see what I'm talking about. Okay, so I am working still on the underwater quilt. I'm calling it the underwater quilt. I still don't have a name I like for it yet. I've tried under the sea, underwater, swim with me. I really don't know what to call it. So those of you that have been watching, or those of you that want to talk about it a little bit later, when I finish sewing the row that I'm on, I will hold it up so you can see it. I don't know what I want to call it. So if you have a suggestion, I would love to hear it. I have named so many quilts over the years that I'm out of my best ideas. So there you go. Okay, so today we're just going to keep puttering along on this. during some chatting here. I know that I've got one person watching. I don't know. Something just flopped over. I'm trying to figure out what it is. I don't know. Oh, and if you're hearing jingling noises, it's my necklace here, and it may disappear before the end of this live stream if it keeps driving me crazy. Oh, I just turned off my machine instead of turning it on. It's been a day. Anyway, all right, let me see which way I was going, because I'm doing a ripple. It helps if it continues in the same direction. So I'm going to switch cameras here. Oh, look at how beautifully I lined that up completely on accident. All right. So I'm trying to sort of mirror this, but not exactly. So sometimes I'm putting in extra humps, sometimes I'm not. Sometimes they're tighter, sometimes they're further apart. The way I'm looking at it is, the ocean isn't regular. It does things its own way. It isn't always the same. The different layers of water. Hold on. Since I turned it off, I have to redo the needle down. Different layers of water act differently. So that's just one of those things where, it's close enough. Now, I did get an email from somebody who asked me, because of the last live stream, if I don't enjoy quilting, and that's not my favorite part, why am I doing it? Why don't I just get this custom quilted? And I certainly could. And if this was going to be a gift, I probably would. Or if I was going to put it in a show or get it judged for something, then I probably would. But I'm not. This is just going to be for my own use. And at that point, I don't care. I like the different ripples, and it saves me a chunk of change. Honestly, this can be a very expensive hobby. And so I see no reason not to save some when I can. If it's not going to make a huge difference in terms of, is it a client's? Is it going into a show? Is it being judged? What am I doing with this? Is this going to be a pattern? Yes, I am going to pattern this quilt. But this was also done with all scraps. I did not buy a single thing for this quilt. If somebody wanted to purchase and they were concerned, and really worried about how it was going to finish, then yes, I would say go ahead and get it custom quilted. But this is a scrap quilt. This is going to be my quilt on the couch. It's occasionally going to get caught in the mechanism potentially, etc. Is it worth a couple of $100, if not, more than that, to get it custom quilted? Not to me. Is it worth custom quilting versus an overall design? Yes, it is to me. So, for example, I have here, I don't think I'm going to be able to line this up quite as nicely. Here we go. So, I have this fish here, right? And as I'm sewing here, I'm going to stop. And then I'll continue my ripples on this side. I'll even potentially catch in these little parts here with the blue as I'm going through. But I don't want it on the fish itself. An overall design is going to put something and it's going to be on the fish. I'm going to quilt scales on the fish. When it comes to things like the kelp, instead of quilting it across, like I am doing the water here, I'm going to run quilting this way. I think that doing the custom quilting to the level I'm going to do it is going to enhance the quilt for my own enjoyment, if nothing else. I think that the overall design would distract from the fish and the things I've put all this time into putting into the quilt itself. So that's why. Okay, so I'm going to pull the quilt out because I just finished that row. And I'm going to, oops, hold on, I'm hung up here. What am I hung up on? Okay. So I think what I'm going to do is just kind of, I don't have a good way to show it to you right now all over. Oops, and hopefully I'm not messing you up too bad with the microphone. Okay, so at the top I have sand, then I have the tops of the waves, then I have a school of fish. Oh no, there are a couple of single fish over here, right? And then I've got a school of fish here. So I tried to do a bunch of different ones. As you can see here, I've got a big purple one here. I've got a big orange one further down. I was going for some perspective, so it would look like some of the fish were further down. And then at the bottom, I have the bottom of the ocean, and I have this little crab. And I have the starfish here. So it is a little cartoony. I mean, this is definitely not a real crab. First of all, it's the wrong color because they don't get this color till you cook them. Just like lobsters don't start out red, they start out green. But I wanted to have some fun with it, have some that was a little bit more realistic, some that was a little bit more cartoony. So, yeah, it is what it is. So that's what I'm working on. The kelp, I did change colors when it changed direction, so that hopefully it would look like it was kind of twisted. However, with the quilting, although I could put twists in it so it curved and looked like it was spinning around, that far I'm not going on the custom quilting. That would just be totally insane. And so that's why I'm going to do the up and down to at least give some of the same effect without worrying about it with a spinning. So anyway, so if you have a good name for this, let me know. I will make sure that when I have all of the water done, that I get it put up on the wall so you can see the whole thing before I do start the other stuff. So you can kind of see it at that stage, and then I'll start doing the fish and the kelp and all of that. I'll probably do the kelp first. Or the sand. I may do the sand at the top and bottom first just to get those locked in. This is spray basted, so there's only just so many times you can horse it around before you have to start worrying about some of those glue bonds breaking or the batting shifting, because this part might be glued to the fabric, but this part, not as much, right? Because it's not actually touching the fabric. It's just how the batting's put together. So I don't want to run it through 8 million times. I will say I'm about a third done with the water. I've gotten all the water done right to here, all these pieces. I've not done the sand on the top, but about a third of the water is complete. I did mention that when I come up to a fish or something like that, I do jump off to the side. I'm going to show you that when we're doing it again. And that has worked really well. So for the third that's done, I just did these little white sections today. But all the rest of them that I've done, I've buried all the ends already. And it's really nice because I'm leaving myself these nice long pieces to snip and then use to bury the ends. But they're not just loose in order to create nests on the back. So overall, it's been really helpful. And by every time I sew, for example, when I leave here tonight, I'm going to take this downstairs with me, and before I sew again, I'll have buried all the ends. So I'm not getting rat's nests on the back, I'm not getting anything snagged that shouldn't be snagged, and it's keeping it a lot cleaner and neater. And I'll snip one loop, bury both ends, on the top, flip it over, bury both ends on the bottom, and now I know I got them all, and I know right where they are. And so it has worked out really well. So if you haven't tried that technique, this is the first time that I've done it in such a way to be able to try and explain what I'm doing, because I've just instinctively done it. So I hope that's making sense. Okay? Now the nice thing is, since all of my ripples go across the short distance on my quilt, I can go ahead and just roll this top so that it fits in my throat, and it'll go all the way off to the end, and then I'll just drag it back and it'll go off to the end again. Kind of like a fish. So that's a nice little feature for quilting this. If you decide you ever want to make this quilt, or one like it, the horizontal does make a huge difference. Okay, and I've managed to pull my thread out, so now I get to... Okay. I get to rethread. Now I am doing, if this is your first time, I am doing a lot of thread changes on this as well. So I'm trying to not have too much of a difference here. So way up at the top I had these very pale blues. Let me see if I can pull this down enough to be able to see. No, I can't. I had some very pale blues at the top. I'm getting into my mediums here, and then I'm going to be going dark. And what I didn't want to do is have a thread like this where it's super noticeable on the dark threads, you know, on the dark squares here, hexagons. There, hopefully you can see it better. Here we go. And I didn't want the super dark colors on the light colored hexagons. So the back is all one fabric. So I have one color for the back, which is nice because I spun up a whole bunch of bobbins for that. But for the top, I am consistently, every couple of rows, having to change my top thread. Now that works out really good for me as well, because it's letting me use up a whole bunch of little spare bobbins and that kind of stuff that I had both in the piecing but also in the actual quilting at this point. Okay, let me see if I can get you a better view. There we go. That's a little better. So I'm pretty happy with how that has gone. Okay, so I'm sewing here, and I get to the kelp, which I do not want the blue to go across. So what I'm going to do, now I've already quilted the water up here to the right. I don't know if you can tell that. Can you see? No. I have quilted everything to my right. So what I'm going to do is lift my presser foot, lift my needle, and I'm going to jog way off into my quilted area. And you can see I've had to do that a couple of other times already. Drop my needle, pick it back up, and then come back over where I want to start quilting again. Now I'm sitting here going, okay, this is cribbing up, and then it goes down, and then it goes up. And so we're going to kind of maybe do a little bit of an up and then down. But again, it doesn't matter specifically. But I probably went up at least 4 inches between where my needle is here and where back here, where I put that needle down and back up. And that really helps because that gives me, like I said, nice big threads to use to bury my ends. I can't tell you how many times I've made the mistake of not giving myself a long enough thread, because then you wind up having to do things like, oops, hold on, let me needle this down. You wind up putting your little knot in. Let me see if I can move to where you can see. You put your little knot in, and then you put the needle in, and then you're trying to thread the needle so that it can carry the thread through, and then you try to pull it through, and it's really annoying. At the very least, that's probably the best way to put it, is it's annoying. And so I've got probably 4 inches on each half to go ahead and get it done. All I'm doing is moving my grip here. Now there have been times like up at the top with the school of fish that I might have had to stop 5-10 times just on the one row. And that's fine. You know, they just all get jogged off to the side, and then I'll come back in and I'll finish it up later. Now, could I have actually gone completely insane and decided to thread match for each of these colors? Because you can see I'm turning into a different color here, and let me see if I can get you closer. Here we go. This thread is much more noticeable now. Here we go. Okay? It's not as good a match here as it was back here. But you know what? It's good enough. I'm still not going to have that huge problem that I was afraid of with the with like the navy on the white or the pale blue or something like that. It's close. It's not perfect. But yeah, I could, if I wanted to, I could thread match each and every time I changed a fabric. If it was for a show, and I was a better quilter, so I was doing it myself, yeah, I might. But in this particular case, again, it's close enough that nobody's going to really notice or care. Or if they do notice, they notice. You know, it's one of those facts of life. But no matter what thread you use, you're not going to be perfect on every single square anyway, no matter how close you try. The only way you can do it is if you hand dye the fabric and dye the thread at the same time. So they're all in the same vat, and you're only going to do, let's say you're going to do 10 colors, and you're going to do a bobbin's worth of thread for each of those 10 dye lots. If it's the same kind of material, so if it's 100% cotton thread and it picks up the color exactly the same as the material, which it won't, because even the same piece of fabric doesn't always take the dye up the same way, that's the only way you're going to get really, 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 really close for all of these. And to me, it's not worth the time to try to do that. If it is you, God bless you. I would love to see the photos when this is done, because I'm sure it'll be gorgeous and perfect and everything else. When you see when this is done, it's not going to be perfect, but hopefully it'll be fun and, you know, bring a smile here or there. That's really all I'm looking for. Okay? Alright, so back to sewing. Alright. So I believe I told you about the clients that I was at with the tsunami of ants last time. The good news is... Oh, I'm jammed up here. We got all the ants taken care of. We got all of that done, and they started the repairs today. So hopefully my client will be able to move back home as soon as she's medically able. And we don't have to worry about the house and the mold anymore, so that's good. But, you know, things are kind of weird in my world, so there, you know, a tsunami of ants is not that strange of a thing in my life. I think I want one more stitch there, so I'm going to do it by hand, just it's right next to the kelp. Give myself a little bit more working room. Lift my foot, lift my needle, jog off a few inches, drop the needle, pick it back up, and then come back over here. I tend to hand crank down that first spot, and then I'll needle down again. If this is your first time here, this is just a generalized casual environment. Usually there's a half a dozen comments in the chat at this point with questions or suggestions. I'm always looking for suggestions for things like books on tape to listen to, etc. So I start with the tip of the day, then we do the annual quilt, which this year is a mystery quilt. That's what you all voted for, that all the members, well, not members, all the people who watched and sent me an email voted for a mystery quilt this year. And so I update you on that. I update you on other quilts that I'm doing. I don't update on client quilts. Although it's interesting and takes up a bunch of time, I do not want somebody's privacy to be impinged on, so those I don't tell you about. But these ones that I'm doing for myself, for example, yeah, I'll tell you about this. Okay, so feet up, needle up, off to the side, needle down, needle up. Back over here. Now, I could just skip this. This distance right here is small enough. Let me see if I can move this camera a little bit more so you can see. This little distance here is small enough that I could just skip this, because this quilting will hold, and then this is going to be outline quilted. So, do I need to put the water in here? No, it would save me some tying off, but I like to do that, so I'm going to. I just think it makes it look a little bit more cohesive. But again, I don't want to go over the fishtail, so I'm going to wind up with 4 additional ends to bury. But you know what? I'm okay with that. Needle down, needle up, and then back over. My deck underneath here is sliding. That's that weird click you heard. Okay. Alright. And then hand crank it down, foot down, needle up, needle down. Alright. Now when I do stop, I do try to stop like at the seam line, because I'm not the world's best at shifting and then restarting perfectly on the same curve. So if it's on the seam, if it jigs or jogs a little bit, the seam kind of hides it. So, or if I wind up taking an extra stitch, nobody's gonna know. Well, now you all know, but you know. Alright, this is the last one. Needle up. Jogging over, needle down, needle up. Coming back. Here. Hopefully that's better. It does make my hand look gargantuan though. But you know what? There's worse things than having large hands, or hands that look large in this situation. Okay, and needle, press her foot down. And now I'm off the quilt. So I'm going to just go ahead and cut it. Now, I don't worry about how far I go in this particular case before I cut it, because when I square this all up and I'm putting on the bindings and everything, I don't have to actually bury these ends, so it just doesn't matter. So I just let them go. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a quick look, and there is no way that this bright blue is going to look good against this. I don't know if we can get in close enough to see. Yeah, this is pretty bright right here in comparison, so I'm going to have to do an exchange. So, since I'm sure you don't want to be staring at the quilt while I do that, not that you necessarily want to be staring at me either, but there you go. Alright, so all I'm going to do right now is I'm going to take the quilt and I'm going to drag it towards me, because I'm going to start on the other end again. Normally, if I were quilting, I would quilt from one direction and then quilt the other direction. This is just so unwieldy on the domestic machine when it's all wound up and I'm trying to work on it, that I'm just not going to worry about it. Okay, I'm going to square this up at the end. If it's off slightly, that'll be fine. I'll deal with it. Again, not for show, not for judging. It's fine. But if you did want to ever do this for a show, then I would sew down the one way, turn the quilt, sew back the other way, just for that little bit more consistency. I need to put my glasses on. Now the one problem with doing that jog over I was telling you is that when you're pulling it back through, if you're not pulling it back on the same exact line, or further where you haven't quilted, you can get snagged in those big loops. But like I said, they've been very helpful to me. So anyway, sorry. So again, first time we start with the tip, then we do the quilt, the annual quilt, which again is a mystery this year. Um, Last year it was based on using up old, not old, but previously made 4 patches. Um, so then we talk about that, and then whatever I'm quilting at the time. So I have had people who have sent me pictures, and so I will talk about what's going on there. I'll make suggestions. Um, my goal for this channel is that it be a fun place to come and relax and talk about quilting. If you want to send me photos, I can put them up. I need advance though because I have to do it on a PowerPoint, but I can put them up and we can talk about what's going on there. And this can be an organizational question or a quilting question. I'm fine either way. My basic rule of thumb is if it won't make my husband blush, I'll answer it. So also not financials. I'm not going to tell you about my what money we have kind of thing. But if you want to talk about budgeting, that's fine. We can talk about budgeting. And I will often tell you things we do in the family, like on Mondays is grocery shopping day. So we have different days of the week for different things to make sure that everything gets done on an appropriate time frame. And we're not always wondering what do we need to do or have to run out last minute to do something. So it's just a way that we work. And I'll tell you when it's something I do for us versus something I do with a client. But I'm happy to answer questions. If you have a question that you don't want other people to hear the answer to, you can include that in your email. And you can write to me at mail@StashBlasterQuilts.com for any of this. But when it comes to organizing, a lot of times people want... They don't care if other people hear the answer because they're just looking for suggestions. And so this way I can share them with a bunch of people instead of just answering you specifically. Now, there's only 31 of you that have subscribed. There are a bunch of you I know who watch but haven't subscribed, and that's fine. I have no problem with that. If you if you do a comment, or you want to put something in the chat, or you want to send me an email, I can, at this point, still respond to everything I get. If at some point I have 1,000 subscribers, and everybody is sending me stuff, I may not be able to respond. But right now I can. So please feel free to go ahead and ask those questions, because this is a great time to be able to get those responses. At some point, if I set up a Patreon or if there's a membership level or something like that where I guarantee responses, well, that'll be different. But as of right now, I'm going to respond to everybody. It won't be an issue. There's not so many of you that it's a problem. If you write to me and I don't respond either on the next live stream or to your email, try me again, because there could be an issue. Okay? I want to be able to answer those questions. So the idea is just to keep it calm, keep it simple, have a good time. You can listen to me, rant and rave occasionally, because, there's times that things don't go right for me either. And then we can talk about basically anything you want to talk about. So I don't know if at any point I'm going to do anything more with like Instagram, etc. Right now, I'm still writing my second book. I am hoping to have it done the first or second week of June, because then it needs to go to people to look at it and edit it for both content and for typos and things like that. Because I would like to have it available when I do the conferences this summer. To sell. So the book is kind of taking priority right now. When that settles down, I'm hoping to have more time to sew. But we also have a lot going on in the company where there have been deaths in the family for people, and then I've got people out sick. So instead of working less in the field, which was my goal, I'm actually working more right now. So it's kind of weird. But overall, I love what I do, both with my organizing clients and with my quilting clients and my teaching at quilt guilds and teaching at conferences. So I really don't want to give up any of it. And that's a problem sometimes, because when one thing crushes in, Everything else has to give for a little bit. And then when that loosens up, then something else can take more time. So that's something I'm going to have to learn to balance better. But I am trying to work less in the field just because I'm getting older, and I've had arthritis since I was 12, and so every year it gets just that little bit worse. And so carrying boxes and spending all day doing small manipulatives, sorting things out, they're starting to get a little more painful. So I'm hoping that means that as I can shift to more speaking, I'll also be able to shift to more quilting. So we'll see how that goes. But I am doing Zoom classes for quilting. I'm doing in-person classes if you're part of a local guild. I'm in Chantilly, Virginia. So I'm right near Washington, D.C., for those of you who might be watching from out of the area. I do have several trips coming up. So if you know of a quilt shop that might like a lecture in Detroit or Boston, I have some extra time built in around a couple of those trips where I might be able to come and speak locally at a reduced cost because there wouldn't be as much mileage and things like that for a shop to cover, or a guild. And so I have an organization lecture, and then I also do workshops. So if you know somebody out there, or where you are, you'd like to have me come on out and actually teach a class, I'd be happy to do that. Since this is a hobby, sometimes people get so wrapped up in perfection that it ceases to be fun. Do I occasionally get to spots in any given quilt where I'm just like, oh, of course I do. Of course I do. Everybody does. If you're doing a paper piecing project, and let's say you're doing something like a mariner's compass, and you need to make 15 compasses, you're not going to be thrilled the whole time. There's going to be days when you're just like, if I have one more stinking point, I'm going to jab myself with it, We all have times like that. But this is supposed to be a fun hobby. This is supposed to be something where you can let your artistic expression go. You can try some new things. While fabric isn't cheap, it's not the most expensive thing you could be doing. And in fact, if you are willing to reclaim fabric, you can do things like go to a thrift store and get 100% cotton sheets, and poof, you have quilting material. You can get old shirts and, cut the backs out of them and use old shirts that you currently have. You don't even have to do all 100% cotton. When I'm doing things with reclaimed fabrics, I have done stuff with fur. I've done plushy fabric. I've done satin fabric. I've done embroidered fabrics. Anything can go. This does not have to be super expensive. You don't need to have a super expensive sewing machine. You don't have to have, the big long arm machine to be able to quilt. Is it better in some ways? Sure. Is it more fun in some ways? Sure. Would I rather machine do a lot of work rather than hand do everything? Yeah, I would. I have a lot less time and I want to produce a certain amount of quilts. So I do a lot on the machine. But I still have a handwork project. I still tend to hand bind my quilts rather than machine bind them. I will occasionally machine them, but it's very, very rare. Because I want to use my time in a way where I can do enough new projects to keep me interested. I can try some new things, and I can have a good time. When I have a project that I'm swearing at all the time, unless it's a commission quilt that I have to finish anyway, if it's something for just myself, I will significantly downsize that sucker. If I was doing that 14 Mariner Compass quilt, I might stop at the end of the first one. And or if I did 6 of them, they might become pillows or table runners or table toppers or something else. I am not going to force myself to do something I am just totally not enjoying and will not enjoy for the rest of its process. So that's part of the stress thing that I talk about at the beginning. And having less stress includes taking those projects that are driving you nutso off your plate. The only reason I'm quilting this quilt the way I am, and I'm bothering to do it, is because I am still enjoying it. And it's a very limited size. It's 50 by 76 or so, I think. Maybe 80, I don't remember. So it's not a double king size. And I figured out what I wanted to do, and I thought through. I don't like quilting. That's not my favorite part. There's going to be a lot of quilting in this. Is that okay? And to some extent, it is for the simple reason that once I get the big fish quilted with the scales, I don't have to do the same thing with the other fish, right? So with the small fish, if I just stitch around them, they're only this big. That's plenty of quilting for the kind of batting I have. I can stop there. I do not have to finish it. And the cool thing is, if I want to later, if I want to go back in later and add more quilting, I can. There's nothing wrong with that. Once it's stabilized, I can always add more. Can I add it by hand so that when I'm sitting under the quilt in my living room watching a movie, could I do more quilting then? Sure. Is there any law that says I can't have hand quilting and machine quilting on the same quilt? No. If I want to add beads or fringe or who knows what to this thing, I can do what I want. So I don't have to stress about it being perfect and being what somebody else would find acceptable. Now, if you want to enter things in shows, that's different, because then you're trying to please the judges rather than yourself. So I would still give a lot of serious thought to, in the designing of the quilt, what do I like doing? Not just this is a cool pattern, so I think I'm going to make it. If it's a type of quilt or quilting that you don't enjoy, don't even start it. It's not worth it. But sure. But then maybe you make the decisions like I could have on this to get it professionally custom quilted. I could still do things like add beading or whatever afterwards. There's no reason I couldn't. But then the perfection part and other people's expectations start to come in. But if you don't have that, there's no reason to fuss with it. Just do what feels good, what you enjoy. And I get a lot of people who take my classes who tell me, I never knew that was that easy. Well, partially things are easy when you don't stress over them. And it's okay to make mistakes. Improv quilting. I can't tell you how many times that I've done a project with somebody. I do a small group, improv group, let's say. And people are stressing over exactly where am I supposed to cut the block apart to insert a new piece. It doesn't matter. What feels good? Where do you want to put it? If you don't know where you want to put it, that's fine. Take a piece of paper and lay it over the top. What do you think? How does that look? But there will be people that will agonize and they stress themselves out. And there's no need for that. There really isn't. So, if you decide to tackle a quilt like this one, and you know it's going to involve steps you're not going to enjoy for the whole time, double think it. Can I do less of what I don't like to do? Can I just let it go and wing it and say, you know what, it'll be fine whatever it is? Or can't I? If this was a wedding quilt, for example, I would have definitely had it custom quilted as well, because the recipients might not want the rough and ready. But that's what I wanted for me, so it doesn't matter. Okay? I've mentioned this before, that sometimes people think I don't care about what my quilts look like. That's not really true. I do. I want my points to look good. I want my design to look good. I want people to like my quilts. But I also know that the people that love me want me to keep my hair instead of pulling it all out. My family wants quilting to relax me, so I'm not yelling at them all the time. It's a hobby. It's something to do to be able to express yourself. And if it is bothering you, it might be a good idea to do something like a retreat, or try a completely opposite type of quilting than you normally do, giving yourself permission to totally mess it up. Make a pot holder, because if it comes out horrible, it doesn't matter. You'll wind up burning it on pots anyway. But it's a great way to try something new, whether that's applique, paper piecing, fabric folding, whatever it is. Do it on something small, give it a shot, try to relax. Or, let's say you're in the middle of a big complex project. It's a wedding quilt, it's a graduation, it's something big. It's something that you're worried about it being perfect. Then have a little, well, to put it bluntly, crap project that you can just go in and maybe do some improv, and you're just going to take blocks and cut them apart and insert pieces and then cut that apart and then insert a different piece and then cut that apart, so that you can work off some of that stress before you touch that important quilt. Because if you are stressed and you're working on that quilt, you're more likely to make mistakes than if you're relaxed and you've had a chance to breathe. So that's it for this time. Again, we're here the first and third Wednesday of the month. Please feel free to like, subscribe, do all of those kinds of things. But I will be here the first Wednesday of the month, starting at 7. I actually start about 15 minutes in advance so that you have a chance to get the alert and then say, oh, let me get a drink, something to drink, and turn it on and get ready so that you're with me the whole time. Have a wonderful couple of weeks. If you're doing the mystery quilt, you've got some cutting to do. So have a great time, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.